Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I will be doing a simple and maybe a bit rambly type video catching up on some of the various movies I've seen recently. Sorry for the lack of content for a while, I don't really have any particular excuse. I just had a huge burst of motivation from January to March, and that motivation waned a bit. I'm hoping to pick up some of the slack with some more stuff like this, and maybe some more tier list type videos again. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks. The first movie I will be talking about is Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. This movie was pretty much exactly what I expected and hoped for. I wasn't expecting some kind of high art or Oscar-worthy movie. I was wanting a real dumb, big action movie with a bunch of monsters fighting, and that's exactly what this movie was. If you didn't like this movie, or you maybe found it to be incoherent nonsense, I would completely understand you. This movie is completely ridiculous and really doesn't make much sense in general, but this movie is just an absolute blast to watch in a theater. It is a movie that understands its own goofiness and fully goes for it. Now yes, the human aspect of this movie is fairly weak and has generally been the weakest part of each of these MonsterVerse movies, but this movie makes up for that with having a ton of monster stuff, especially with Kong, who is pretty much the main character. Whenever Godzilla or Kong are on screen, it's weird how much better the storytelling is than compared to when the humans are on screen. The monsters don't say anything, but you can tell what they're feeling and thinking just by their facial expressions. And I say this to contrast with the human side, which is fairly underbaked and filled with a lot of exposition. Dan Stevens and Brian Tyree Henry are a very entertaining duo, though, and I'd probably say that they're my favorite human part of the film, but they don't really have too much to the characters. And Rebecca Hall felt more like a walking exposition machine rather than an actual character. There's a lot to pick apart about this movie, and it clearly wouldn't work for everyone, especially considering that critics are generally 50-50 on it. But as I said, the monsters are very entertaining, and pretty much all of the fights are really well done. Like, Godzilla freaking suplexes Kong. That's the coolest thing ever. I like that Godzilla and Kong seem to always have some sort of beef because their egos are too large for their own good. And while I do really like Godzilla a lot more than King Kong, what they do with Kong here is really fun, especially with Zuko. There's going to be tons of memes surrounding a certain scene regarding those two. But what Godzilla gets to do throughout the film is fairly fun as well. I did find Scar King as the villain to be a tad bit underwhelming, but all of the fights with him are terrific. The second of these four films is Monkey Man. Since this is a smaller film and it doesn't really seem like a ton of people have heard of it, I'll give a brief synopsis. Monkey Man is about a guy who works as a fighter in an underground club where he wears a monkey mask and purposefully loses for money. This guy is very deeply traumatized and seeks revenge on those who have wronged him in his past. I'd say think Kill Bill combined with John Wick with a bit of a darker tone. This was originally supposed to go straight to Netflix before Jordan Peele saw it and found a way to give it a theatrical release. I thought Monkey Man was pretty great, especially for a first-time director with Dev Patel. The setting is gritty, and the cinematography and makeup effects really enhance that feeling. The action is very visceral and incredibly entertaining. It doesn't have the same amount of insane carnage that the John Wick movies have, but there are some really gnarly moments and kills. I wasn't expecting how contemplative some of the elements in this film were going to be with the lead character, and Dev Patel is fantastic in the film. He doesn't really say much, but you can tell just with his facial expressions that he's gone through a lot of crap. It is a bit more of a slow build than a typical action movie is, but I didn't really find the movie slow by any means. A lot of the first act is setting up the specific environments that will be utilized throughout the entire film, which does give a great sense of detail and care to behind the scenes of the movie. The film also actively withholds information for a significant amount of time until proper moments, which then recontextualize previous events, which I would guess would only enhance a second viewing. And there aren't a ton of action sequences. There's two main ones, but they are pretty extended and move across various locations, which keeps each part and moving element of these sequences feeling really fresh and interesting. The final 20 minutes are particularly great. There's a lot of interesting and frenetic ways that the camera is used that isn't distracting, but also somewhat unique. And there's also a really awesome music drop that feels straight out of the Doom games, which I love because I'm a big fan of that type of music. As far as some of the things that I would say that I didn't like or would criticize about Monkey Man is that it is a little bit too ambitious for its own good at times. The lead character's story arc is also connected to a much more wide-scale political conflict throughout India, which kind of drags down some of the pacing and adds some unnecessary bloat to an otherwise very concise and tight story. While this villain character that is connected to this political conflict and the backstory of the lead character I thought was interesting enough for the movie, I just felt that the expanded role of the more wide-scale politics felt a bit tacked on. I'd say another thing that kind of bothered me a bit was that in certain moments there was some somewhat chaotic editing that happened. This also ties into some of the cinematography. For the most part, I thought this movie was very well shot, but some shots felt a bit too up close to the characters, which that combined with some frenetic editing felt a bit overwhelming. Maybe that's just me. Very well could be just me, so let me know your thoughts on that. For a first-time director, Monkey Man is very impressive, and overall I would definitely recommend it. The third movie I'm going to talk about here is Alex Garland's Civil War. Civil War seems to be very divisive so far as both internet discourse and anything in real life. As for me though, I would probably say this is my second favorite movie of the year, behind Dune Part 2, which, to be fair, doesn't really say much, because there hasn't been that many movies that I've seen this year, so take that with a grain of salt, I suppose. But I thought what Civil War was going for was done very well. This movie is consistently intense and entertaining, and also delivers its themes and what it wants to say in a very unique way compared to what I've seen in other war movies. I will agree that it is very puzzling that there's almost no context behind the conflict. Like, come on, Texas and California, that's kind of a hard stretch for most people to buy about them being united. I think that concept is just inherently goofy and strange for most people. But the movie also does a fairly solid job at throwing in some small little lines here and there about what might have happened. Like there's a line about the president bombing US citizens and disbanding the FBI, and also being president for a third term, which I think most people can agree is an egregious overstep of power. What this movie does do a great job of is showing a mostly unbiased point of view from photojournalists behind a war that would happen regardless of location, whether it's the United States or any other country. I think that this movie does a great job at showing how war can sow unnecessary division amongst people and how it dehumanizes pretty much anyone within it regardless of their allegiance. Other than that, I think Civil War really succeeds at making really intense, heart-stopping sequences throughout the movie that are genuinely anxiety-inducing and range in various scale from small dialogue conflicts to these big battle sequences. And the film also has fairly solid characterization where you can easily care about the characters with very simple characterization, which I think is very impressive. And I have to talk about the scene with Jesse Plemons. That sequence is genuinely one of the most terrifying scenes I've ever seen in a movie. It's not a horror movie, but this entire scene is heart-stopping and incredibly tense. I can remember literally holding the sides of my chair and having a hard time breathing properly during this scene. It is by far the standout sequence of the film, in my opinion. The final battle in DC is also that sequence is also terrific. As far as any issues I have with Civil War, I've already talked about the lack of context behind the conflict. It's frustrating and puzzling that it's not there, and I can understand why people are more angry about it, and how it doesn't necessarily take a political stance. Left-leaning people and right-leaning people are frustrated with the film not taking a more distinct stance on either way, and some people are calling it cowardly, which I don't agree with. The movie's going for a much different type of story than I think people were expecting. But I can also understand why someone might not like this movie because of those aspects as well. And for a more direct criticism, I would say that the very end of the film is a little abrupt. I would have liked to have seen maybe another scene or two regarding the remaining characters that we followed throughout the film, or see like a news broadcast to see how it would affect the United States as a whole. Overall, I would say that I thought Alex Garland's Civil War was pretty great, and definitely a huge step up from his previous movie Men, which I pretty much hated if I'm being honest. This is a harrowing and intense story with some of the most disturbing moments I've seen in a movie in a while. And the fourth and last movie I'm going to talk about in this video is Abigail. This is the newest film from the directing duo that call themselves Radio Silence. They previously did a movie called Ready or Not, which I loved, and Scream 5 and 6, which I also really enjoyed. This is just a really fun and entertaining little horror movie that I had a great time seeing. I also saw it in a completely empty theater all by myself, which was pretty awesome. This is also such a well-rounded horror movie as well. Almost all of the characters have something interesting about them. The kills are fairly fun. Its pace is really great. The villain is really solid. It's exactly what you want in this type of horror film, especially with vampires. I could definitely see myself rewatch this a lot around October and Halloween. If I'm being really honest, I don't have all that much to say about this movie. This is just one of those films that is really fun and entertaining to watch, but also doesn't necessarily make you think about the world on a grand scale or have an existential crisis because it's so good like Dune 2 did. It does exactly what it needs to, in exactly the way that it needed to. Abigail is definitely worth seeing in theaters, and is also definitely my favorite horror movie of 2024 so far. Thank you for watching, everyone. I greatly appreciate it. I've done some ranking and list videos in the past, but never done one that's just straight up reviews and thoughts for multiple movies at once. Let me know how you feel about this format. Would you prefer more individual reviews for movies like I did with Dune, or more of these compilation style reviews to catch up on certain movies that maybe I didn't have a ton to talk about but did want to talk about? I would love to know. Remember to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. And of course, let me know what your thoughts on all these movies were. Godzilla x Kong, Monkey Man, Civil War, Abigail. Did you like them? Did you hate them?